So if you suddenly had like if you had lots and lots of vehicles and lots of buildings, right? That's not a company. It's not a trading company. And if you're making over, you know, if you're using a very small amount of business, you don't need to have a company, right? So the company's house, right? This is company's house. It's the government that creates licenses and issues companies. This is when it gets into, the whole thing of His Majesty's government and Charles and what is Charles and all these enterprises. People own them, right? You can own a building and you can own 10 lorries, right? But it's not a business or company unless you've created a business and company and the entity. The whole thing about the entity, right? But it's a private limited company, but it has limitations. It's limited to what it can do. It's limited by the law, what the law allows it to do. It's limited by what the law allows it and what it has the right to do, including all employment laws, trading laws and regulations. But this is to do with workers' rights as well. But the company, you don't have a company. If suddenly, you had, a biscuit factory that wasn't its certificate and registration and existence of its being a limited company vanished, right? You would be trading illegally. It would be like having a car without a driving license. And then there's additional licenses. But who licenses you to drive? Who allows you to when you've got it? Is His Majesty's government, right? The government. Now, with the companies, you haven't even formed the company. It hasn't even been created. In this day, incorporated under the Companies Act. So it is through another act as legislation as a private company. The registrar in England and Wales hereby certifies. So you're certified, right? Without a company, you can't trade, just like without a driving license, you can't drive. But more than that, it isn't actually a company. Without this, there is no business or company, or not lawful. I mean, you can be driving down the road unlicensed. That is still in effect driving down the road. If you're trading without, being a registered company and without a license and so forth, you are trading, but not licensed. But the company, on the money, right? The thing with the money is it's not yours. It ain't your property. You don't own it. And this is the whole thing with digital currency and the whole argument they're having now. It's illegal to tear the money, to deface the bill. It's illegal to deface or vandalize money, right? It's not your property, the actual notes, even though you're collecting them, it's not yours. Now, the driving license, they issue the license and your license to drive, you hold it, but you didn't create the license, you just passed a test so you can have it, they give it to you. Now the registrar registers the company. This company is formed and created by the government, right? You might own the company and set out the shares and the physical assets, right? All the materials, the vehicles and so forth. So much of the money that you make is the government's money for tax. That's not yours. But the entity itself it's Companies House, right? All the acts of the government are, the government's law and acts. Well, in America, it's the people, we the people. The company, even though you registered all your assets and you own all the company, all the money going through the company of taxes isn't owned by you, right? It's you've got to hand it over to the government. The actual entity itself, it's registered to you. It's registered to you. What's a registrar? Registers, right? So you register with them and then they issue the certificate. But you see, so the company is the officers of the companies, it's like Companies House. The premises, the building, the house, it's not a personal private residence. It's actually regarded as an operating company in business. Under this certificate, with the crown emblem on there, I believe that not just through the separate legislation like the Incorporated Companies Acts and the other acts, it's His Majesty's Government Companies House. They're His Majesty's Government Companies, and they are formed and created. But they're collecting money from you. So it's not all your money. You are selling and making things, and part of the money is the government's, the tax. Now, this is the thing. All the different branches of government, like the Ministry of Justice, the Department of Transport, and so forth, they are government departments that employ government staff, and they're civil servants. In the private limited company, you have your own staff, but you've got to give them certain rights and laws and so forth. But it's not like government. I'm not trying to say that because you've got the certificate on your wall, that the office is a department now of the government, of Companies House, an extension of it. But in a way it is. In a way, even though your staff aren't civil servants, that's because they are not, their operations aren't funded by the taxpayer, right? But the company, instead of, there's tax in and tax out on this cobweb, on this spider's web, right? So all the government central departments and civil servants, they are employed and paid with the money from the taxes which is coming in, right? Where's the money coming in from? The money is coming in from these companies who can make a nice little profit from themselves as long as they're raising taxes for the government to keep the government going. All that money is the government's tax. In a way, all the companies under Companies House are like, they are almost like mini departments of Companies House, but this is all money in to the government. And then in this little operations setup the government have got for how they run the country, that money then goes into, be put to use to go out to local councils or be used in central government and pay staff and pay MPs and all the other functions, although you've got your local council tax as well. But so you are a branch of the government, really. You are a branch of the government that all your staff are paid out of this money that you make and part of it is to go towards the staff of the government itself that even issues you the certificate. It's all like an operation. When you hear that guy, Charles Wells, who in Canada, he's investigated the whole setup of Canada. It was an enterprise venture in the north, in the northernmost part of America on land, and it ended up becoming HSBC Bank. It apparently, when you look into it, he's only like an overseas extension of us. It's not, they don't actually have their own constitution. So we've been told. If you check out the Charles Wells video on Richard Verbs, he explains it. But if the actual company is formed and registered and certified, right, as incorporation and a limited company, it is private in the sense that, it's got its own staff, and it might even be a nightclub or a private members club that operates. But it's not just a matter of it complying with the laws and liberties of, England. It's not enough to say that, YouTube's policy says it will comply with state and federal and foreign law. It can't not comply with state and federal law. It can't not have that in its policy, really. And even if it didn't have it in its policy, it still would have to comply with it, even whether it said it did or didn't. The rights of the workers, all of the employment rights of the workers are applicable the same as the right to petition rights. They're applicable, the right to petition, same as the union rights and so forth. But when you're petitioning His Majesty's government, because the company isn't the buildings, and the company isn't the vehicles, and the company isn't the staff, the company is the entity, and the entity is formed and created by the government, Companies House. And therefore, really, when you're running petitions on a platform or putting them in a newspaper, if it is a company, not only do you have your normal regular rights like medical rights and the laws applied to it and employment laws and so forth, they have to comply with the petition right. Just like they've got to give tax over. In fact, a portion of the company itself is not the company's. And, it is limited by law, but also by rights. So, you have, your rights are applicable to these private companies in full, unless it says otherwise. And particularly when you can't be held to any commitments or prosecuted. It's not necessarily a legislative clause, but it's identifying what actually is this. Because the money of the company is part of it is the government. And the company, the entity itself, is issued and licensed by the government. It is the government's, it really is the government's entity. Only in the same way that all the money issued to you is not your property, you've been given the credit. You don't own that money. You are the holder of it, the keeper of it. You have been accredited with it. You're not meant to be allowed to destroy the money. It's not actually meant to be ultimately your property. Just like the company, the entity is being issued to it, you have got the shares and the ownership and all the, if you've got a dispute, you go to civil court because you're wanting the government to make a decision on a matter. So, the rights of the country that apply to the realm and the people don't not apply to private companies. In fact, quite the contrary, which is where you've got all these trading unions and so forth. And out of all the laws and all the rights, the right to petition actually gives you the most, the maximum allowance that you can get in any laws for rights, really. In fact, there is, if you're going to look under the trespass law for without reasonable right or excuse, you are using a right, particularly if you're gathering evidence. The police usually have to get a warrant from the courts, right? So with courts authorization, it increases. And subpoenas from courts actually compel companies to give things over, even though they might not have had to give it over in the first place. They might have voluntarily given it over, unless they had a reason not to, but the court compels them to. I believe that the right to petition is already made out with the authority to compel these companies, particularly when it's in publishing in any kind, in digital or newspaper, because some of them processes carry a legal requirement to publish. Like, that's why the newspaper has the legal notices section and the public notices. That's what it's there for. And digital is the same. So it comes down to what the right actually. This is why I think it's important to investigate the actual right, what it originally intended, and what it extends to cover. We know it covers painting on walls and placing notices and with an immunity without consent required, deemed consent and consent. So the thing is, we already get given consent onto these platforms and newspapers when you're going about your normal publishing business, right? So I don't think that they're allowed to they're not allowed to create a policy that takes your rights away. There are certain things they've got to do. And I don't think you need to go the extra way to get a subpoena or a warrant or anything additional with the right to petition, because these newspapers are already openly offering to publish people's things, but only just not certain kinds of them. Now, there's certain kinds of them that they're publishing that are illegal, but the argument would be a lot easier if we could just argue, what is and what isn't illegal with the right to petition. What's making it extremely awkward for us all are these policies that aren't not the law. They're just made up by the company. There is no law for them. And usually when you're working in a company, the only way that you can claim from a company for employment breaches is if they broke the law of employment, right? So I think they're breaking the law of the right to petition by letting us on and then throwing us off, when they're already allowing certain things anyway over 18s, which covers pretty much anything you can have unless you're breaking the law. If it's over 18, then, you can pretty much put whatever unless it's illegal, and then it's clearly illegal. But they've created this area in their policy where it's neither, they're just making things up that aren't the law, and they're not applying rights. And I just don't think they can even do it anyway. And you can take YouTube to court for failure to apply rights, for failure to comply with federal law. That they're not complying with the law. And all this thing about, being able to, YouTube being immune, they're only immune from things that are illegal, that other people upload. That's different from refusing to upload things what actually are legal. It's completely different. YouTube not being prosecutable for things that we upload if it's illegal is completely different to YouTube refusing to have things on there that can be on there or that have got a right to be on there. That's different. And I don't think that that law that Robert F. Kennedy's quoting actually is applicable for immunity for YouTube. In fact, I'll have to check it out. I'll have to look at that law.